Hello, it's episode 51, if you can believe that, of the Security Weekly News for the week of 19 July 2020. Twitter updates, Chinese GoldenSpy malware, Cloudflare, Rapid7, crypto Trojans, and BadPower. All this and Jason Wood when we return on Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM.
All right. What do we got today? Chinese tax software. That actually sounds like the intro to a joke or something, but no. Chinese tax software was found to have a backdoor by TrustWave. It's called GoldenSpy backdoor software. It's got a great name, so they probably had good marketing. And it was found in the software called Intelligent Tax, which is produced by Asino Corporation, which is apparently software that you almost have to have for negotiating, paying local VAT taxes if you're doing business in China. All of this is, of course, managed by the Golden Tax Project, which is managed by the People's Republic of China government, and on and on and on. GoldenSpy was found installed in a system 2 hours after the intelligent tax software was installed. So it downloaded and installed these add-ons after it was installed. And it was not clear if Asino was involved in the malware installation. They did not have evidence of who was doing this, but it's certainly possible. Other malware was also found in this package earlier in the year in a whole different article. So I don't know. I mean, one of the things about doing business in China is a lot of times you have to do what they tell you to do. Kind of like in the United States in some ways. They do have a taxing agency. If they come and tell you you have to do something, if you have to install something, you tend to do it. And it is necessary to negotiate all the different taxes. At least that's what they say. So be careful if you're using any of that kind of software. Cloudflare. Well, we all use DNS about 10,000 times an hour. I'm using it right now. You just can't tell. And it's not just us. Apps, I mean, everything uses DNS all the time. I mean, that's just the way apps work. Except there it is. But basically, everybody's using DNS. In particular, the 1.1.1.1 Cloudflare DNS, which was increasingly popular. But on the 17th, that's last Friday, in the evening, Cloudflare reported that a router in Atlanta had bad routes across their backbone. That's a quote. And at 3 a.m., it was blamed on a configuration error, and they said they had absolutely, under no circumstances, had not been attacked. I mean, I can believe that. I mean, you put configs out, and something goes wrong in the routing tables, and it causes a minor problem for me. But when you have lots and lots and lots and lots of traffic, guess what? You push out a bad route, and all of a sudden, the whole world stops because everybody's using that 1.1.1.1. It did bring down Discord, a whole bunch of crypto coin exchanges, and Bitcoin wallets. So there was all kinds of impact from this outage. And basically, the wrap-up said they were down for about 25 minutes, which doesn't sound like that long. But when you're talking about cryptocurrency exchanges and people doing trades, you can imagine how long that really seems if you're sitting there yelling sell, 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 or buy, 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 and getting ready to jump out the window. And the largest impact was on Bitcoin exchange. I put an article up about that, just that particular thing, so you can see the graph of what happened there. South Korea has been one of the most effective responders to the COVID crisis, but their mobile app was found to contain serious flaws. after being called out on various security holes in their COVID response application, they basically replied what everybody is always thinking. We were really in a hurry, and I'm quoting this, we were really in a hurry to make and deploy this app as quickly as possible to help slow down the spread of the virus. We could not afford a time-consuming security check on the app that would delay its deployment. And boy, if I had a couple of euros for every time somebody said that. Basically, there was about 162,000 people in Korea had downloaded that app and were using it. And it was found that attackers could retrieve names, locations in real time, and various other details from the app. Numerous flaws in other COVID tracing apps have been found around the world. This is just the latest example. So India, et cetera, all have had examples of COVID apps that were, pretty much that same phrase about, well, we had to build something and everything went south. We didn't have time to check it. Google's virus app at the same time, so this is the Google-Apple joint project, claimed that it would protect privacy and limit tracking of users. So this was the original promise. We reported this story way back when. They originally said, we will not track you. We will not collect data on you. We're just trying to do what's right. And that was made with Apple as a privacy promise back in April. Okay, so to my knowledge, they haven't violated that promise. But numerous countries adopted the code out of the Google app for their own apps. And since the adoption, those same countries have all expressed concern that Google is indeed collecting data through this app and that the GPS must be turned on in order for the app to be used, even though Google has repeatedly stated that GPS and location monitoring are not a part of the app. The app uses Bluetooth scanning to detect other devices, and as such, it shouldn't require GPS or any other kind of location detection type thing. But between Wi-Fi, mobile net, Bluetooth, et cetera, all of these things can be used to somehow determine the location if that feature is turned on and they required it. Pete Voss from Google said that the app does not use device location and that without additional permissions cannot access the location services. Apple had no comment on the app about location services, but did say that they use rotating IDs to log contacts and that their app does not track users in any way. Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, said no geodata is collected and that the app can be trusted. And I do kind of trust, Angela Merkel. She's a scientist. Basically, the whole row, though, is about Google requiring location data to be enabled in order for the app to run, despite claiming that the app does not use that feature. So that's what's got everyone up in arms, is they say, well, you say you don't do this, but then you force us to turn this feature on, which it does exactly that. So a lot of people have concerns about it. Is it valid or not? I'll leave that to somebody to figure out. We'll report on it if you do. Rapid7 released their cloud exposure report, which is really worth taking a look at. I like this report. It's very interesting. For instance, their D list of industries that have garnered the most breach and ransomware headline includes healthcare, financial services, and technology. Not that that's a shock. As a statistician, I'm like, well, those are probably the industries that have the most to lose in this game. Aerospace was their top industry for not having any of this. And, of course, a lot of aerospace is government sanctioned and government controlled and under top secret and whatever. There is a cool Yeats reference on the executive summary number 6, slouching toward the internet. And if you've never read The Second Coming, well, now's the time. Turning in a widening gyre. The falcons, I got to remember this. The falcons cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. I really like that poem. It's one of my favorites. If I was into tattooing words, I might get that poem tattooed, but it's kind of long, so it'd be painful. One interesting thing in the report, though, and it's a really long report, so they have summaries of every section, but I think it's like almost 170, 180 pages long, is there were significant declines in the use of Telnet, POP3, and other in the clear protocols, which was a really good thing to see. I saw like large, double-digit declines in the use of Telnet, for instance, which was really, really both scary, horrifying, and great. But although FTP was not one of them that declined. So we could argue that maybe it had already declined, but I see way too much FTP. Stop using FTP. But it's definitely worth a look at this massive, massive report. There are 4 cryptocurrency trading apps that contain Trojans being found on Mac platforms. CoinTracer with a Z, CupaTrade, LikeATrade, and Trezorus are all fake versions of Katana, which is an actual real cryptocurrency trading app. Apparently, they were cloned or forked from that original app. Those 4 contain Trojans that use Gamera to grab cookies and browsing histories, among other things. They also then, after they grab all your cookies and browsing history, they drain your crypto wallet and take screenshots of what you're doing. So be very careful if you're using any of those products or have downloaded any of those. Gamera has been around since last fall, and the Katana company, which is based in Switzerland, has issued warnings about all these evil clones running around. So they actually were the ones that notified people that there were evil clones of Katana. Be very careful. And people were getting ads for these pieces of software. Twitter released a 900-word, which they would call very, very lengthy. I would call very, very brief, of the 15 July attack, which allowed access to verified Twitter accounts. We reported on it last week. They basically said that it was social engineering scheme that was used on a small number of employees, which included getting through their 2-factor protections. And then they accessed tools which were only available to internal support teams, which was how they knew that it was some kind of phishing attack on their employees, and proceeded to target 130 Twitter accounts. 45 of those accounts had password resets initiated and tweets sent after the reset. These were all those famous people you saw, including Barack Obama and Elon Musk and so on. Up to 8 other accounts that they reported had their information downloaded using the Your Twitter data tool, but none of those were the verified accounts that everybody's been talking about. Krebs had a whole bunch of information on the accounts. I put a link to that story on there. And he was reporting about @6, which is the original account that belonged to Adrian Lamo. And Lamo, of course, being deceased, so this account is controlled by Lucky225, who's one of the old phone freaker people. Krebs talked with Lucky225 in his story, and then despite that, and Lucky said that despite the multi-factor approach in use, that he got a password reset notification via Google Voice. And by the time he went there, the email associated with the account had already been changed and the multi-factor authentication had been disabled. Lucky then went on and provided a full blog entry, which I also attached to Wiki. So if you want to see his whole account of all this happening, you can see it there. There's a Microsoft server flaw, CVE 2020-1350, which allows a DNS request to push malware onto the server. Microsoft said they were not aware of anyone exploiting this flaw, but that a patch had been issued on Patch Tuesday, which was last night for today. And this flaw had a CVSS score of 10, and Microsoft indicated it was a wormable vulnerability, which would make sense. If you can push code onto a server via a DNS construct, and you've got an exploitable port open, then you could obviously write a worm that would spread this software to all the other Microsoft servers. There were quite a few other serious patches issued this week for both server and Windows 10 platform. So be sure your patch management program is in full swing. As we know, over the last few weeks, we've been seeing all this RCE stuff. Well, he once claimed that he could eat more prairie oysters than any gosh darned eastern sissies. He could tame a wild boar with his singing and could cook up a roast prairie dog better than any fancy French restaurants back in St. Louis. But today he's going to talk. Today he's going to talk about VPNs that leak their logs and the logs that didn't exist. It's Jason Wood.
Oh,
who writes this stuff?
I have no idea, but it sure isn't me.
Well, it was fun.
Oh,
it was fun anyway. It's my alter ego wrote it this morning. So,
oh, that's hilarious. Prairie dogs, French cuisine in St. Louis. Right on.
Exactly.
Right.
That's how I think of you, Jason.
Boy. All right. Let's talk about VPNs instead. With that lovely intro. So there was a blog post on the Sophos Naked security blog that caught my attention as they were talking about data leaks from VPN providers that supposedly weren't logging anything, and yet they were. VPNs have become extremely popular with folks who have become concerned about their ISPs or somebody spying on them. As you know, back when net neutrality was killed, supposedly by the FCC or whatever, saying that they're no longer going to allow that to be the case. I saw a friend of mine who I went to high school with, who was now a college music professor, very non-technical type of person, started to ask about VPN providers and whatnot, so he could somehow defeat net neutrality, for example, or the anti-net neutrality. Anyhow. It's kind of when I looked at it and thought, oh my, this is where everybody's going to start to misunderstand what VPNs are for and what they can do. And that has continued to go on. Again, now, with the explosion of VPN providers that are out there and people who are claiming, organizations that are claiming that they can provide all kinds of protections and stuff like that, and that they don't log anything. Well, that's not always the case. And in the case, in this instance, we have 7 providers that were named in the Sophos blog post, which I had never heard of. One was, FreeVPN, there was Rabbit VPN, and some other names like that. That they were actually logging a lot of information. And to make it worse, they actually put it into Elasticsearch database and expose it to the public on the internet so that it's nice and searchable and you can find all kinds of stuff. I think there were something like 1 billion records that were in there that covered about 20 million users potentially. And the data logged included, and this is a quote from the blog post from Sophos, activity logs, PII, including names, emails, home address, clear text passwords, Bitcoin payment information, support messages, personal device information, tech specs, account information, direct PayPal API links, etc. So yeah, that was bad, right? That data in there that shouldn't have been being logged at all, and obviously, it not only was, but let's make it easy to access and index it all for everybody. Now, there are, of course, very legitimate reasons to use VPN for folks out there, particularly if you're in a country that you are really worried about government surveillance and people coming after you for things that, for communications that you may have between other individuals or communication with sites and whatnot. Definitely very useful in that regard. And it's more mundane usage. It's very useful if you're hooking up to the local coffee shop's free Wi-Fi and you want to encrypt some of your information, send it through VPN tunnels so you're not exposing it to whatever security controls they don't have in place. We're basically providing an encrypted tunnel from where we're at to some kind of VPN device out there, and then it goes out onto the internet. Unfortunately, some folks see this as a way of being anonymous, and VPN providers, some of them, are only too happy to promise anonymity and say that they can do that. But that's not what VPN does. All the VPN does is make it so where whoever's providing your internet access at the moment, be that your ISP or the local Starbucks, they can't see what you're doing. It's all encrypted. They see the VPN connection get initiated, and then they see encrypted traffic occurring. And then at some point, this data exits a VPN node and goes onto the internet just like any other internet traffic. So if you're running clear text passwords, they're going out over that network in clear text. All you're doing is moving the risk of surveillance from your local ISP to the VPN provider and their ISP. So there's really, it provides some privacy there, but I mean, it was originally designed towards the idea of, hey, I'm going to hook up into my corporate network using this virtual network to protect my company's information and stuff like that. And then once I get out into my corporate environment, that data transfers around like normal inside of that supposedly protected environment. And we've started to adapt that. I've used it, for example, to say that I am somewhere else in the country so that I could watch a ball game that had, wasn't being broadcasted where I live, wasn't being allowed. unfortunately, VPN providers, some of these, a number of them, are proclaiming that they keep no log files at all, that they track no information about anything that anybody is doing. And as Doug mentioned earlier, if you are in a country that can require that, they're still probably going to be keeping some information on hand because they are required by law to do it. And they may just make mistakes. Essentially, it's a great claim, but we have to trust that they're actually doing that. And as we have all experienced, and we could probably, since most everybody here is going to be in IT in some regard, can point at examples where things got misconfigured and data was unintentionally logged that wasn't expected. I can tell stories of cracking open Windows event logs and seeing lots of data that never should have been logged in that format, but basically a developer was doing some troubleshooting. They started firing off some logging data to help them debug it. It was getting saved to the Windows event log, and I'm looking at usernames, passwords, social security numbers, and things like that. And then I have to go off and try and get that out. They probably never intended for it to make it to production, or maybe they didn't even think about it. But regardless, it made it to production, and here we are. And that seems to be the case here, except worse. They have not only done this logging, but they have stuffed out into a searchable database for everybody to check out. Hopefully that's been taken down, but still it's a problem that we're going to continue to face. So what can we do about this? Well, I think most everybody who's listening, nothing that I have said and I've complained about and ranted about it here is news to anybody. If we want anonymity, you have to do a lot more stuff. You have to start using not only things like VPN, but Tor, and then taking steps to make sure you're not identifying yourself anyhow, and on and on. It actually takes some work. You don't just connect up to an open VPN provider or whoever else. So go out there and communicate this to people about what VPNs can and cannot do. VPN providers are promising things that they can't provide, anonymity being a prime example here. They also screw up, just like anybody else, or they put things in place on purpose, and we just don't know about it. So make sure that people are looking and investigating the reputation of these organizations and not just going for free VPN and saying, rock on, here we go. We are putting a lot of trust in these organizations to protect the data that we're sending through to them. It's one of the reasons why I tend to stand up my own VPN if I'm particularly concerned about something, because my trust levels are low. Encourage people to do their homework. Point them to this episode of this podcast where we just talked about some of this stuff. If you'd like to go ahead and take a look at all of the VPN providers who botched this up, go ahead and check the show notes. We've got the link to the blog post by Sophos, where they name names and have actually some more information in there about maybe what went on. It could be useful to you. Just do your homework, everybody. Make sure that you're not trusting somebody to do something that, they just can't do it all. With that, Doug, over to you.
All right. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, especially if the VPN you're using is, in Russia or the Ukraine or anywhere for that matter. So yeah, it's a big problem. Finally, BadPower is an attack that claimed by Chinese researcher at the Xuanwu lab at Tencent, who makes a lot of the games that are on the app stores. The attack claims to be able to corrupt the firmware of fast chargers and cause them to ignite. So the attack basically changes the parameters to deliver more voltage than the device can handle, and then hilarity ensues. According to the report, they chose 35 fast chargers and found 18 models from 8 different vendors that were all vulnerable to this BadPower attack. I did attach the article, which translates pretty well. The Tencent report is in Chinese. The article was in ZDNet, but the Tencent report is in Chinese, but it does translate pretty well. And they do have a cool video attached to it showing them demonstrating things catching on fire from running the BadPower attack. So it's definitely worth checking out. And that's the news in the time of plague. I'm Doug White. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Security Weekly News. I'll be back Friday with the Security Weekly News wrap-up and Thursday night on Security Weekly. Bye.